We're halfway through the week. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Korea ranks 26th in global competitiveness, unchanged from last year, despite seeing improvement in its macroeconomic environment. After issuing a ban on North Korean coal earlier this year, China has resumed coal imports from Pyongyang last month, just before UN sanctions on the commodity came into effect. These stories and more coming right up. The World Economic Forum has released its global competitiveness rankings, and Korea came in at 26th place, the same ranking it's held for the past 4 years. Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
In its annual report, the World Economic Forum gave South Korea relatively high marks for its fiscal sustainability and prices, as well as infrastructure, with both categories ranking among the top 10 in the global rankings. However, South Korea's labor market and finance sectors were weaker than other areas, in 73rd and 74th respectively, out of the 137 countries reviewed. Overall, South Korea's global competitiveness ranking has been glued to 26th place for the past 4 years, and the report noted that South Korea is one of the few advanced economies to experience a general decline in performance for the majority of its pillars of competitiveness. The report also pointed out that the South Korean economy still shows large disparities between the various criteria. It advises the South Korean government to focus on making its labor market more flexible and to focus on innovation-driven growth. Switzerland topped the list, followed by the United States and Singapore. Park Ji-won, Business Daily.
China appeared to be taking UN sanctions on North Korea seriously when it began cutting off coal imports from the regime earlier this year. But it seems Beijing bought one more load before the new UN sanctions came into effect. Our Kwon Jang-ho has this report.
After 5 months of zero coal imports from North Korea, Beijing's customs office has announced that 1.6 million tons of coal worth $138 million had been brought in August. This comes as a bit of a surprise, as China had announced in February that it would not take in any more North Korean coal for the rest of the year, and the customs figures had reflected that. News outlets are citing local sources which say the latest imports were shipments that had already been paid for but were stranded in Chinese ports after that ban was imposed. However, as it was within the previous UN sanctions limit of 7.5 million tons for the year, watchers say Beijing may have given last-minute approval to bring the shipments in before a new blanket ban on North Korean coal came in mid-August. When the Foreign Ministry spokesperson was questioned about the import figures at a regular press briefing on Wednesday, he said not to worry and that China was strictly implementing the UN Security Council's resolutions. It's perhaps a timely boost for North Korea, as sanctions and a national drought seem to be having an effect. The South Korean government revealed on Tuesday that North Korean gas prices had tripled in recent months. There are signs of food shortages as well, with Beijing revealing that North Korea had imported 14,000 tons of Chinese corn in August, a nearly 46-fold increase compared to last year. These figures come before the latest UN Security Council resolution was passed on September 11th. The latest sanctions reduced North Korea's oil imports by 30% and banned the export of all textiles. An official from Seoul's Unification Ministry said that the UN sanctions, along with China's ban on coal, iron and lead, could reduce North Korea's exports by 90% compared to last year. However, questions remain as to whether that will be enough to slow down the regime's nuclear program. Kwon Jang-ho, Business Daily.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is adopting its strongest ever sanctions on North Korea, targeting 8 banks and over 24 individuals linked to the regime's financial system, with hopes of denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. Our Kim Hyo-sun reports.
The U.S. Treasury Department is intensifying measures to further pressure North Korea. The new sanctions target 8 North Korean banks, including Agricultural Development Bank and Tail Credit Bank, as well as 26 North Korean nationals who are representatives of the country's banks operating in countries such as China, Russia, and Libya. In a statement Tuesday, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the sanctions are aimed at fully isolating the regime to achieve Washington's broader goal of a peaceful and denuclearized Korean peninsula. He added that the measures are in line with UN Security Council resolutions. Washington now plans to implement a stricter secondary boycott that prohibits any financial institution doing business with the North from accessing the U.S. international financial network in order to cut off money funneled into Pyongyang's development of ballistic missiles and nuclear bombs. The latest sanctions, which Mnuchin described as, quote, the strongest sanctions ever, are the fifth round of penalties imposed by the Trump administration. As it stands, they now target a total of 33 institutions and 48 individuals. Kim Yo-sun, Business Daily.
And for our coverage of the local financial markets, we have Lee Ji-hye joining us on the line. Hello, Ji-hye.
Hello, Ji-yoon.
So tell us how local stocks performed on this Wednesday.
Sure, Ji-yoon. Korean stocks traded mixed today after opening lower on foreign selling amid ongoing tensions between North Korea and the United States. The benchmark Kospi closed 0.07% lower to close at 2,372.57, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq closed 1.06% higher at 649.24. Samsung Electronics closed 0.04% higher. SKhainicx also up 0.37%, and LG Chem gaining 0.67%. Hyundai Motors was flat. POSCO lost 1.27%. KEPCO shed 0.78%, and Naver also fell by 2.52%. By sectors, household appliances, gas and utilities, as well as internet software services were on the downward slope, while financial institutions, independent power producers, and publishers gained the most. Many are looking closely at Korea's economic data for the third quarter, especially following the 10-day Chuseok holiday. The focus is on whether or not heightened geopolitical tensions had a measurable impact on the economy as well as investor sentiment.
Now, on that note, Ji-hye, former business leaders and government officials say North Korea is likely to have little effect on the South Korean economy.
Yes, they did. At a seminar held by the Federation of Korean Industries, former Standard & Poor's Sovereign Ratings Committee Chairman John Chambers was quoted as saying that Korea's fundamentals are solid enough to cushion these impacts coming from external factors. He mentioned that the robust economy in regards to trade balance, the fiscal status, and the real sector economy, despite facing numerous risks due to external factors, including China's bad retaliations, a potential renegotiation of the Chorus FTA, and continued North Korean missiles and nuclear tests, to name a few. Analysts are saying that the IT sector is providing the main Kospi index with a strong backbone, with a 10 trillion won jump in net profit year on year, with semiconductor profits alone rising by 8.6 trillion won.
Now, global oil prices have hit a near 26-month high amid supply concerns. Can you tell us more about this?
Sure, Ji-yoon. Brent crude for November delivery is around 21 cents or 0.4% as of earlier today. This measures to about $58 and 65 cents a barrel. This comes after a 1% increase the day before, peaking at $59.49, which is the highest since July last year, as well as a jump of 34% from the yearly low. Analysts say that this comes amid threats from Turkey to cut crude exports from Iraq's Kurdistan region after Turkish President Erdogan mentioned potentially cutting off a pipeline that carries between 500 to 600,000 barrels per day from northern Iraq to the Turkish port of Ceyhan after Kurdish leader Barzani's victory in an independence referendum. The OPEC, as well as other major oil producers, have been supporting oil prices with production quotas, though U.S. crude has lagged behind Brent with concerns that U.S. production growth could lead to an oversupply. This has been Lee Ji-hye for Business Daily.
SKhainicx shares have enjoyed an extended rally on the Kospi index, but its upward climb has been slowing as of late. This as a landmark sale of Toshiba's chip unit looks to be far from final, despite last week's board approval of the multi-billion-dollar deal. Our Yoon Kim has more.
Last Wednesday, Toshiba's board approved a plan to sell its prized semiconductor unit to a consortium led by Bain Capital, apparently ending a 9-month bidding run. The news sparked investor demand for shares in Korean chipmaker SKhainicks, a key member of the group made up of firms from Korea, Japan, and the U.S. SKhainicks share prices were driven up to a peak of 86,300 won on Monday, up more than 88% year-to-date. But as the week wore on, its bullish run began to falter. The papers were yet to be signed, and Toshiba's unhappy venture partner Western Digital said Tuesday it was seeking another injunction to block the $18 billion sale. In a statement, Western Digital said it was disappointed at the Japanese conglomerate's decision that came despite big concessions made on its part, including leaving the rival consortium. In particular, it said it could not allow the semiconductor giant to go to a group that includes a major rival, SKhainicks, citing the risk of technology leaks and likely roadblocks down the line when the deal undergoes regulatory scrutiny. Meanwhile, another member of the Bain-led consortium, Apple, looks to be stalling the deal from being finalized for creditor approval. Explaining the delay to banks, Toshiba reportedly said it's still waiting on Apple's commitment letter, as it was not ready to agree on all the key terms. Some reports say the Silicon Valley giant is trying to negotiate a bigger pipeline of memory chips to secure a stable future supply. Apple's comment amounted to no more than a promise to sign on as early as possible, but time is not on Toshiba's side. It's facing a March deadline to complete the deal or face delisting from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Market watchers say regulatory reviews of the sale of the world's number 2 in NAND memory chips stands to take at least 6 months. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
It's expected to be an eventful week with 2 important economic indicators scheduled to be released in the coming days. They're likely to give important clues on whether the local economy's recovery path is on a solid footing. For more, we have our Kim Ji-yeon joining us in the studio today. Hi, Ji-yeon.
Hi, Ji-yeon.
All right, so tell us what we can expect this week in terms of economic data.
Sure. On Thursday, Statistics Korea will release its Consumer Price Index for September. Last month, the nation's Consumer Price Index jumped 2.6% on year, the biggest increase since April 2012, as a string of floods and heat waves over the summer took its toll on grocery prices. Take a look. Prices of fresh fruit and vegetables spiked almost 23% on year in August, driving up the overall consumer price index. All in all, Korea's consumer prices have been rising steadily, close to the government's target of 2% a month since the start of the year, possibly hinting at an improvement in domestic consumption. But consumer sentiment for September, released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, showed that it fell slightly for the second straight month. So we're getting mixed signals on whether domestic consumption is improving at a pace that could underpin recovery in the local economy.
Although consumer sentiment has shown signs of improvement, it is yet to be seen whether that could induce increases in domestic consumption, which is being dragged down by household debt.
The government is rolling out new measures next month to tackle the household debt, which stands at $1.2 trillion. Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon said earlier this month the debt problem is heavily intertwined with other economic issues in such a way that it'll take some time to get to the bottom of it, and that there is no one-size-fits-all answer. He did hint the measures will be focused on preventing more debt from piling up and supporting those that are at risk of defaulting. Kim says the ministry is running through various databases, including those from credit agencies, to find patterns and assess the economic impact if the government were to strengthen financial regulations. The government is also expected to take into account the deleveraging by the U.S. Federal Reserve and its impact on local financial markets. Many fear that the Fed's tightening could lead to an exodus of foreign capital and put upward pressure on market rates, with other major central banks also looking to normalize their fiscal policies. Back in 2005, there was a huge flight of foreign capital worth $17.4 billion over the space of 2 years, with the U.S. hiking interest rates. To prevent this from happening again, the BOK could consider raising its own benchmark rate from its current record low of 1.25%, where it has remained for more than a year. But an increase in market rates would make it harder for households to repay their debt, which could affect the already sluggish domestic consumption, which is holding back overall recovery in the Korean economy.
So what's due up on Friday then?
Well, Statistics Korea will release figures for industrial output for August. In July, output across all industries rose by 1.2% all month in July, rebounding from a 3-month slide. And big output gains in automobiles and electronic components contributed to an overall rise in the mining and manufacturing sector. While the statistics agency said there was general improvement in the industrial environment, it may be too soon to breathe a sigh of relief since the base effect of low figures seen in previous months had also played a part.
So all in all, what is the government's view on Korea's recovery momentum for the second half of this year?
Well, the statistics agency and the BOK see that the recovery momentum is not at a standstill and that it'll pick up in the latter half of this year. It says the discouraging figures are likely to be temporary, with consumers looking to pounce on the latest releases of premium smartphones. And these include Samsung Electronics Note 8 and its local rival LG Electronics V30. And of course, there's the Apple's iPhone 10, which were all unveiled earlier this month.
So now with the long Chuseok holiday just around the corner, we're hearing that local retail and services sectors are expected to see some windfall as well.
That's right. There's also a major discount event being held among retailers and department stores nationwide. And it's called the Korea Sale Festa. It begins Thursday and will last until the end of next month. But experts say it's going to be hard to project how the holiday season will affect the Korean economy. And this is due to the many uncertainties, including geopolitical risks from North Korea and Beijing's retaliatory measures against Seoul's deployment of THAAD.
So taking into account all these factors, I guess, will the Korean economy be able to grow at a pace to meet the government's target?
Well, I think it's too early to tell at this moment because according to the BOK, the economy has to grow at least 0.77% during Q3 and Q4 to reach the Moon Jae-in administration's annual growth target of 3% this year. And despite the months-long rally in exports, GDP growth was seen at 1.1% in the first quarter, which slowed to a meager 0.6% in Q2. And the BOK has been more humble in its estimates, projecting growth in the high 2% range for this year. That, of course, is banking on the assumption that domestic consumption and employment figures will pick up during the latter half.
All right, let's hope for that. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
At a joint ceremony this morning to mark the 11th Korean Day and the 2017 World Korean Community's President's Meeting, President Moon Jae-in pledged to support and protect Korean expats living abroad. Leaders of more than 200 overseas Korean communities were in attendance, and let's take a brief look at what the president had to say.
비록 사는 곳은 다르지만 대한민국의 역사 속에서 재외동포와 내국민들은 언제나 하나였습니다.
Thanking them for their high voter turnout in the presidential election, President Moon vowed to protect expats from the threat of terrorism, crime, and natural disasters. He said the government will help Koreans abroad improve their respective communities through economic exchanges with small-sized domestic firms. Moon also pledged to solve the North Korean nuclear issue peacefully and urged expats to support the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. He emphasized that a successful Olympic Games could help foster peace between the two Koreas. Korea is now home to more senior citizens than there are children in the country. That's according to Statistics Korea, and it's the clearest indication yet that Korea is on its way to becoming a super-aged society. People who are aged 65 or older now count for almost 14% of the entire population. Our Won Jung-hwan has this report.
Korea's senior population, or people aged 65 or older, has surpassed that of young people for the first time this year. According to data by Statistics Korea released on Tuesday, the number of people over 65 reached over 7 million in 2017, accounting for a record 13.8% of the total population. With a record low birth rate and a prolonged life expectancy, this pace is likely to continue in the future, and experts expect this figure to grow over 40% by 2060. The report shows that the nation's age-child ratio, or the percentage of people aged 65 or older to the number of children aged 14 or under, stood at 104.8 in 2017, surpassing the 100 mark for the first time. The ratio was 6.9 in 1960, 20 in 1990, and 34.3 in 2000. But rose sharply to 50.4 in 2006 and 98.6 in 2016. With Korea rapidly becoming an aged society, other social problems are rising as well, such as an increase in the elderly dependency ratio, which is a measure indicating the number of dependents to the working population aged between 15 to 64. According to the data, the ratio of elderly population per 100 working age population stood at 18.8%. But the figure is expected to surpass the 80% mark by 2060 if issues like low birth rate continue to push the country towards a super aged society. Won Jung-hwan, Business Daily.
The government is set to take special measures to prevent any bird-related diseases starting next month in preparation for the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs said earlier today it will step up preventive measures with a particular focus in the October to May period. It will restrict the breeding of ducks at certain farms that are vulnerable to bird-related diseases, while offering compensation to the affected farms from November to February. It's estimated that 98 duck farms raising over 131,000 ducks will be affected. K-Bank, Korea's first internet-only bank, is expanding its business portfolio, heating up its competition with traditional banks. At a briefing in Seoul earlier today, K-Bank said it will launch mortgage lending services and insurance products by the end of this year, offering more convenient financial services to its customers. The screening of mortgage applications is set to be conducted around the clock, including on weekends. Special 2001 commemorative banknotes will be issued in November in celebration of next year's Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Now, these bills are not only good souvenirs, but their expected future value could also make them a solid investment as well. Here's our Elliot Kim with more.
The front of the commemorative bill features a dynamic image of a speed skater and a tiger, with a pine tree featured on the back. Korea has a rich history of commemorative coins, with the first being produced in 1970. But this piece of currency celebrating the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics is Korea's first ever commemorative banknote. While the bill has been approved for official use in transactions, few people see any purpose in that, as it costs 8,000 won, 4 times its 2001 face value.
In the case of commemorative currency, when people bring them to the Bank of Korea Exchange Center, we will exchange them at the actual value, rather than the distribution price.
Over time, though, commemorative currency often increases in value, especially among collectors, and can be used as an investment tool. Currently, the highest valued piece is Korea's first commemorative coin from 1970, which was launched to celebrate the country's 5,000-year-old history.
At the time of issue, it was worth about $885, but now it's reached around $31,000. Scarcity and being the first one of its kind has made it very popular.
Some of the coins have increased in value due to scarcity, significance, and preservation status. But many of the coins are worth little more than their face value. So not all of them have turned out to be a wise investment. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
And that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.